This is the end of Metallica's story, something that I recorded in March 2026 in the middle of Israel and United States and Iran's war and internet shut down by the government. So I'm recording this and I don't know when this blackout will end and even I can publish this podcast one day. So in these dark and bitter days and a protest that had happened a while ago in my country and many of my people lost their lives. Metallica is arguably the biggest and maybe the most important band in the history of metal and even in the larger scale of music history. That's a bold statement, but it's one you can make with confidence. Few bands had such a massive lasting influence on so many people over multiple decades. They've created some of the most unforgettable music ever recorded and turned themselves into the biggest and most significant musical projects the world has ever seen. That's the story we're diving in today. A detailed documentary of Metallica. I really hope you enjoy watching this. It's long and in-depth, so if you can, please stick with us to the end and share this video with your friends and support our channel, subscribe and leave a comment below so we can keep making these kind of deep dive episodes on our channel in the future about the artists we love. The first time James Hetfield met Lars Ulrich, he had one word for describing him: a rich kid. Lars grew up as the son of a famous Danish tennis player, Torben Ulrich. He lived in a mansion in Hellerup, east of Copenhagen, and he had everything he wanted. His father, Torben, had won multiple Grand Slams through his career, and as he got older, he shifted his focus to playing horn, clarinet, and saxophone in Copenhagen jazz ensembles, making movies and generally living out his artistic nature. Lars grew up under that same creative, energetic shadow, and he traveled the world with his dad, met famous musicians, and got the honor of becoming godson of legendary musician Dexter Gordon, one of his father's closest friends. At age 9, Lars got a free ticket to see the Rolling Stones and Deep Purple. Even though his dad didn't like Deep Purple, Lars begged him for their album, Fireball, and that became his real introduction to rock music. He was stunned and he then spent hours outside of Deep Purple's hotel just to catch a glimpse of Ritchie Blackmore, legendary guitar player of Deep Purple, and even maybe following him down the street. Deep Purple wasn't enough though. Lars wanted to dig deeper into rock, and after this, he met someone who introduced him onto lesser known bands at the time like Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, and UFO, and that's when he started dreaming about becoming a rock star and starting his own band. Because his parents were often out late at parties, Lars grew up pretty independent. He made his own breakfast, went to school, came home, and even bought his own concert tickets. At 12, his grandmother, seeing how obsessed he was with rock and drums, bought him his first drum kit, and what a kit it was. With his newfound interest, drumming quickly became his thing. He had tried singing, mostly in the shower, but hated his own voice, and so drums won out. But music wasn't his main focus yet. Up until age 16, he was still on the tennis path, something that felt natural since he'd grown up around it. But after moving to the United States, first Miami then Los Angeles, he realized he had no real talent for it and quickly dropped the dream of being a tennis player. Around the same time, he discovered Iron Maiden's debut album and everything changed. Iron Maiden was one of the leading bands in the new wave of British heavy metal and was about to drastically change the sound of future music. So one of these changes clearly was blowing out our teenage Lars's mind. In those early American immigration years of his life, he felt pretty alone, so music became his closest companion until he finally started making rock-loving friends, and one of them was Brian Slagel, a boy who later founded Metal Blade Records, and so the two of them spent endless hours discovering new music together. Lars mostly listened rather than playing. His drum kit sat disassembled in a corner. And when Brian came over one day and saw his kit. Lars said to him that he wanted to start a band, and Brian, half teasing the spoiled rich kid thing, basically said, yeah, sure, why not? Brian was a super nerd and was also publishing a fanzine called the New Heavy Metal Review and was obsessed with promoting new wave of British heavy metal bands. And meanwhile, Lars, who was beyond passionate about his music and talking endlessly about music with Brian, actually started practicing drums seriously. After getting better at drums, Lars decided to find people to jam to his favorite songs he had learned, and in March 1981, Lars put up an ad on a magazine called The Recycler to look for musicians who wanted to play metal with him. So a few weeks later, he met two guys named Hugh Tanner and James Hetfield. Their first meeting and jam session was awkward though. Parts of Lars' kit kept falling apart mid-song and there was tension throughout their session, and James hadn't found his voice yet, so after this weird session, they drifted apart for a while, but Lars went chasing another path. Lars, full of restless energy, was a nerd, and maybe before starting his own band, he needed to study other bands and their reason of success, so he decided to fly to England that summer to hang around some bands and learn how they work. And so his first experience of studying and making connections was through Diamond Head. He simply just got a ticket to England, and after getting off the plane, he went to their show straight after it, and the band, who knew Lars through his countless letters to them, was simply shocked when realized a young teenager came all the way from US to see them, and that was enough for them to invite him to hang out, and eventually he became friends with Brian Tatler, guitar player of Diamond Head, and he even invited him to stay at his house. With this process, Lars was able to watch this young band closely and get a real sense of how a young, hungry metal band could be operated and even secure its path of progress. He also somehow talked his way into Motorhead's studio while they were recording Iron Fist. A great opportunity for a young boy who was a die-hard Motorhead fan, and because of this connection, he even somehow managed later that year to even meet Lemmy at a US show and tell him he was running the US Motorhead fan club, another sign of how deeply he was already living and breathing music. A newfound experience that fueled him up so much that after getting back to the States, he had this confidence to call James again and try to restart things with him. But who was James Hetfield? James was completely different with Lars. Working class family from Los Angeles who their father abandoned them and was raised in a strict religious household. His mother refused medical treatment for her illness because she believed it would be interfering with God's will, and because of all these messed up situations, James grew up angry, burning with unending resentment. His dad Virgil was a good man though. He was a truck driver who owned his own small company and married James' mom Cynthia, who already had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and with this new marriage, James and his sister Deanna were a result of their love. With countless arguments through the years, when James was 13, Virgil walked out of the home one day without any explanations and never returned again. His mom first told the kids he went on a long business trip. A big lie that she couldn't hide it from the kids more than a few weeks, and then she finally confessed the truth. Their father had left them. That loss and even betrayal from his own dad hit James really hard. He was already a loner at school. The religious rules of avoiding medical help and even scientific studies prevented him to even attend school's health classes, so as a result, he felt even more cut off from normal teenage life. He played football, got injured, but was too embarrassed or awkward to tell anyone properly what's wrong with him, and he couldn't answer his coach's simple question, "Where does it hurt?" A rare situation for a fragile teenager which suffered from a lot, and all of this fed into his deep well of anger and loneliness. But what about music? How did James was introduced to music? Music came into his life partly through his mom. who played amateur opera and classical piano, and when she saw his son banging on a friend's piano, she signed James for lessons, but he hated classical pieces. They weren't what he was hearing those days on the radio, but there was no other choice. This was the music her mother considered real music, and no other music James was allowed to learn. But as you can guess, these classical lessons were valuable to him, and he later found out how useful they can be because this lesson accidentally gave him something important: the ability to play and sing at the same time, a skill he later mastered. But what was James' real introduction to rock? James first got onto rock through his older stepbrother. Different music that he was always looking for and listening to, and Black Sabbath and their weird and scary music opened up a new doorway on young James's mind. Songs that other kids said their parents wouldn't let them listen to and they were scared of them and have nightmares because of them, but James had fallen in love with them. After this, and inspired by early rock and heavy metal bands, James started playing acoustic guitar and implemented some chords that he had learned on piano on the guitar, and after a while, he switched to electric guitar, and almost without any particular musical lessons, he started jamming out with some other people and even joined some bands. Some teenage groups that he covered some songs with them, and during this period of time he even went to Aerosmith and AC/DC concert and got blown away when Steven Tyler, Aerosmith singer, called everybody motherfucker. A weird attitude that he has never seen from any singer before, and it blew him away. With James dreaming about being a rock star, he met a boy called Ron McGovney and he played a lot of music with him. So with Ron's aid, he formed a band called Obsessions with some other friends he had, and they started performing some songs on a stage together. Songs from UFO and some other bands. Music that he could play them flawlessly and even sang UFO ones occasionally. But James didn't continue much with this band. During his activity, he made a song and he showed it to them, but they didn't seem to like the song. So after realizing they're not into his own writings, he decided to leave the band and forms another band called Syrinx. A Rush cover band with some original material that playing and jamming with it didn't last that much either, and with James' mother's death in 1980 due to cancer, everything ended. Cynthia refused to consume any medication and painkillers until her deathbed, and her death hit James really hard. After his mother's death, he and his sister had to go to their brother who lived in another house at a distance of 20 miles from their previous house in Los Angeles named Bree. So this big change caused him to leave his previous band, and this is the foundation of forming James' new band. In his new high school in Bree, James didn't know anyone, but a teenage drummer called James Mulligan and another boy called Hugh Tanner, when they saw James with a flying V guitar, made up their mind to suggest him to play with them, and this was a way James found his new friends and they formed a new band together called Phantom Lord. But there was a problem. They didn't have a bass player, and the only person James knew who could handle this situation was his friend Ron. Ron, who had never played bass in his life, decided to come and work with his new formed band, and with a borrowed bass guitar, his activity started in this band. So with this new lineup change, James moved out from his stepbrother house to live with Ron, because Ron and his parents had a big house and James and Ron could live in a part of this house, and they even managed to turn this house's garage to their own rehearsal room. So after these changes, they just played and played, and of course, James started working as a janitor to cover his living costs. But the band didn't last long. He decided to work in music business field, and with glam popularity at those days and under Motley Crue's influence, James decided to start a glam band with Ron, which they named later Leather Charm. So they wrote some songs, and one of those songs was Hit the Lights. A pretty good song that which later, of course, parts of it became a song with the same title in Metallica, and it was a hell of a song that boys really enjoyed it and gave James a sense of accomplishment that maybe he's not wrong and he can write some good stuff. But things didn't last in Leather Charm either, and Hugh, who seemed to blame himself for breaking up the Phantom Lord, mentioned an ad he had seen in the recycler. A request of finding some musician from a boy called Lars Ulrich, and he had wrote in his ad, drummer looking for other metal musicians to jam with, Tigers of Pantang, Diamond Head and Iron Maiden. James was really interested to find out who this boy was, and so he accepted Hugh's idea to go and meet up this guy, a drummer who had similar music taste with him, and just like this, Hugh and James Hetfield went to see Lars. But let's not forget, Ron did not go with them. Ron was thinking of becoming a rock concert photographer and was not interested in pursuing a music career anymore. So James finally went to see Lars, and that's the moment when James Hetfield saw a rich kid whose dad is famous and can't even play drums. They were admitting that the two didn't see each other at all after it until that Lars' European summer trip happened, and he called up James upon his return and invited him to his house, and then these two young boys started to hang out together. Going to Lars' house was like going to Wonderland for James. He could barely afford one album purchase a week and now was facing someone who bought 20 albums a week and had a massive music collection, and this access to so much music completely changed James. A new doorway that when James noticed similarity of his musical taste with him gradually faded his negative reasons about Lars' musical ability, and so these two became friends this way. After teaming up with Lars, James invited Ron to play with them too, but when Ron saw Lars playing, he told James that he's awful and he can't even keep the rhythm and he doesn't like to jam with him anymore. Something that of course did not matter to James that much because he enjoyed the company of Lars, and this friendship and playing together was the key element that made Lars get better and better gradually after this. And in the meantime, when Ron doesn't participate in practice sessions, the two found a very cool name for their band and they got ready for their musical journey that changed the world: Metallica. A name that perhaps in Lars and James' teenage minds at the time was merely a good and exciting name, but in my opinion, they themselves knew well what capabilities were lying behind this name and idea, and it's going to change the world soon. Let me tell you a little bit about the story of Metallica's name. Lars had a friend named Ron Quintina who was planning to publish a metal fanzine, and Lars had gone to San Francisco with James to see Ron, and they were looking for a name for Ron's magazine together. An incident that had coincided with these two's search for their band's name, and well, in Ron's list of names for his magazine, he had Metallica next to Metal Mania, and when Ron chose Metal Mania for his magazine over Metallica, these two put Metallica name on their band and got a bit closer to their dream of forming their own band. But let's not forget, the band was just a name and nothing more. Lars and James weren't playing much as a band at all because they couldn't find anybody to jam, and the idea of Metallica was just nothing more than a name. But that didn't stop Lars, and when he found out that his old friend Brian Slagel is putting together a collection of songs from LA new wave of British heavy metal bands to promote them, give this project a shot and record something for it. Brian had done some projects for new wave of British heavy metal bands before with different name, but this time it was going to be called Metal Massacre, and well, after talking with Brian, he agreed to have Metallica in this compilation too. But there was a big problem that Metallica did not exist at all, and you can guess probably Lars did not tell Brian anything about this problem, and he just asked him for a day to deliver their music, and right when the deadline of delivering the track was getting over, Lars recorded a song in a cassette with James and a new member. A new guitar player called Lloyd Grant, who was also teaching James some lead guitar and now was Metallica's lead guitar player. So the process began and they recorded their first song and they could deliver it to Brian so Metallica could enter the Metal Massacres compilation, and their first single was born just like this. Let's not forget that to mix what they've recorded with a 4-track tape recorder, they needed $50 to do some processing on their track, and well, neither of the guys had that amount of money. So a guy called John, one of the studio crew, lent them $50, and this man and his $50 maybe was one of the biggest reasons that helped Metallica to release their first song Hit the Lights on this compilation. Hit the Lights, with all weaknesses that it had, in those early days of Metallica was a tsunami. A perfect song that crushed all other songs in Metal Massacre and suddenly brought this compilation with 2,500 copies to astonishing sales numbers and republishing again. And it is interesting to know that the guitar solo of this track was recorded in one take, and even they recorded in Lloyd Grant's house on their way up to the Brand's studio. And now with this song, everybody fell in love with Metallica. This is a remarkable song that we will definitely cover later in our story's timeline and the release of Metal Massacre, but if I want to get back to our main story's timeline, after this recording, the band gained an immeasurable amount of confidence. So with James' insistences, Ron rejoined Metallica, and since they have had some issues with Grant, they put another ad, and here is when a Guitar Hero responded to their ad, and after some interviews, he joined the band. Someone who you can probably guess who is, and is none other than Dave Mustaine. About Dave Mustaine, we will have a full podcast soon, and we are going to tell you the story and his background later, but now we have to talk about him a little bit. Dave Mustaine was a boy who was a highly talented guitar player, and not only he didn't imitate anybody, he was the biggest hero of himself. After meeting up with Dave, James immediately became friends with him because he could feel that he had a rough past like him, and he could sense his hunger for being a famous musician, and of course he was into his some crazy guitar techniques. With this new lineup and addition of Dave, this talented, technical and cool guitar player, now it was the time for the world to see Metallica. Lars once said, "We were a band which took AC/DC and Judas Priest song structures and played them with Motorhead speeds, and well, this was something that was next level metal music for metalheads of that time, and maybe was the main reason for Metallica's early success, because people now wanted faster and more aggressive music after rock and punk and metal waves, and now Metallica was even going to be more metal than new wave of British heavy metal." James Hetfield had a very unique and distinctive vocals in this period, and his voice was similar to Sean Harris, singer of Diamond Head, and his voice back then was really different from what he later achieved, and it was with their early performances that he gradually discovered he doesn't like his vocal to sound this way, and he had to step forward and discover his own voice. A transition that through it, James didn't want to be a frontman either. From his teenage years, he had multiple issues with his face and his pimples, so he didn't want to be the singer and frontman of the band. Did you realize what I just said? One of the biggest and most fascinating frontmen in music history didn't have confidence for singing and thought he wasn't good enough. So he wanted the band members to hire a new vocalist instead of him so he just could play the guitar. This is one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life. A big and unbelievable conflict in my opinion that of course the band tried to solve it, and they even hired a new singer too, but after the interview they felt that their musical taste with him was different and James started singing again. Because the Hit the Lights single in Metal Massacre was released during this time and many people were digging his voice, so he was halfway convinced that maybe he should give singing another shot and do the job anyway. Hit the Lights was a hit in LA metal music scene, and of course it made Metallica with wrong spelling on its sleeve with double T's the hottest new band. Everybody was talking about Metallica now, and James, the one who made this song famous with his voice as a singer and guitar player, had no other choice to continue and maybe improve his character more to fit in the position of the frontman. With a small change and decision that James performs without guitar like other frontmen, Metallica started performing various shows including the famous Whiskey Go Go Club, and these live shows could make people and critics talk more and more about Metallica. After these attentions, the band started making some songs in the studio, and after a while, they released their first demo called Power Metal. A collection of 4 tracks: Hit the Lights, Jump in the Fire, The Mechanics and Motor Breath. Some brilliant and incredible songs that they use in their next and more cohesive collection, and kind of their first really official demo, the legendary EP of No Life Till Leather, and you can easily guess that this demo was like a crowning jewel in those early days of Metallica for people first discovering them. Metallica was progressing very successfully and had performed good shows, including a very awesome live show in San Francisco, but despite all of these successes, Dave Mustaine was a big problem. Dave, with his drinking problems and selling pot and smoking it constantly, was making big conflicts for the band. When he drank, he was out of control and violent, and no one could stand him at all. But that was not the whole story. In those days of James being a shy guy as a singer and frontman, Dave did all the talking in the shows, and somehow, after a while, he started to believe that maybe when he talks instead of James on live shows, maybe he's the true leader of the band, and you can guess that this made a lot of problems for them, and Dave was eventually turned into a complete douchebag. So after this sense of Dave being a jerk piled up between the band members, this resentment toward him one day just exploded. One day, Dave came to band's rehearsal with 2 dogs. He was selling weed, and sometimes, because of being a guitar player, he couldn't keep his stuff safe and keep an eye on them, so he got these 2 dogs to protect them. But when he brought them to rehearsal, these dogs suddenly jumped in Ron Magoni's car, and when James saw this scene, told Dave, "Get your damn dogs away from Ron's car." And so, by hearing these words from James, Dave, who felt offended, got into a fight with him, and then the angry James told him that he's fired from the band. Although the very next day Dave came over and cried and apologized to James, and they got along, but one thing was certain: they didn't want to continue with him as a guitar player, and the only reason James accepted his apology was because of this, that nobody could play guitar like him. So the tension kept building up between them, but Dave wasn't supposed to be the first person who leaves the band in this period of time. In complete disbelief, Ron McGovney was the first person who eventually decided to leave Metallica. Ron didn't have that much interest in playing bass guitar, and he also saw Metallica more as James and Lars's band than his own. Ron, unlike the others, didn't progress that much in playing music, and even sometimes James played his bass guitar too on the recording, and this process even made the band members to think of a replacement in bass guitar position. Something that in the meantime, Ron, with multiple fights that he had with Dave Mustaine, realized that he's done. He didn't like Dave at all, and even other band members were always spending from his Visa card, and his house and garage was busy because of some Lars and James dreams, and even his dad's truck was in the service of the band, and this was bothering him a lot. So realizing that everybody is milking him and they're treating him just like a toy really got on his nerve, and these fights and various issues finally make Ron leave Metallica. A sad choice, which in the meantime, Brian Slagle had a perfect alternative for it: a bass player called Cliff Burton. Cliff Burton was Trauma Band's bass player, and based on Brian's recommendation, James and Lars went to see his performance, and well, according to their own diaries, their jaws dropped after seeing him play live. With lots of negotiations and ons and offs, and after about 4 months' effort, and with multiple rejections of their request to join Metallica, finally Cliff Burton accepted to come and play with them. Cliff had noticed that his band, The Trauma, is becoming annoying for him and their music is becoming commercial, so he, under one condition, finally accepted to start as bass player in Metallica. Band members must leave LA and come to his city, Bay Area. A request that which Lars and band members accepted because they didn't have any good feelings from LA anyway, and this was a way that they could have a breath of fresh air in a new city with an extraordinary musician to work with, and it could definitely improve their sound and musical direction. So with Metallica moving to Bay Area with Cliff Burton's presence, finally the band experienced a complete and stable and cool lineup that was the best they could dream of, but it's not their final lineup, and Metallica is going to face another important lineup change that we'll get to in a moment later. But before that, what was Cliff Burton's background? Clifford Lee Burton, son of Ray, an engineer, and Jan, a school teacher, was the last child of Burton family with 3 children. A boy whose brother Scott David had passed away at 13 due to brain disease, and his death made the Burton family face a huge grief. Therefore, Cliff, for the sake of his music lover brother, wanted to become the greatest bass player in the world, and he put a lot of effort to achieve it. So after a year, with his amazing talent, he even could surpass his guitar teacher and become a kick-ass musician who could even read and write music notation. A cool boy, an awesome bass player who in weeks between Christmas and New Year of 1982, Lars, James and Dave collected their stuff and went to him in Bay Area to start a new chapter of their lives with him. But where did they stay? After a bit of digging, they've managed to stay at one of their friends' house called Mark Whitaker, who was also manager of a metal band called Exodus. So after moving in with Mark, he became their sound engineer too, and this was the way the Metallica, with these changes, started a new path in the new city. With Metallica entering Bay Area San Francisco, now the band was progressing very fast, and with performing successful shows and also getting their songs aired at local stations, band entered a new era. But let's not forget, there was also another way to introduce their songs to metal music audience, and that was a way which Lars was the master of it: cassette trading. From the days of being a fan club owner and having a lot of connections within the heavy metal community, Lars with his connections could run the trading Metallica cassettes going, and now many music lovers who just traded their albums with their pen pals could introduce each other to a band that was different and was heavy, fast and next level. Metallica was getting popular, but residents in Bay Area San Francisco wasn't the final station for the band, and they were supposed to go and perform a few shows for a husband and wife called John and Marsha Zazula, a couple who had become interested in their music and wanted to hold some shows in New Jersey for them, a new opportunity which they welcomed, and eventually, after doing these shows, band started to stay with them for a while. This record store owner couple loved Metallica, a new band with unlimited amount of talent and potential which they believe could change the metal music forever, and seeing this potential and their fresh musical tastes made them to decide to gradually take over their management, and now they were investing on them. By the time Metallica started working with Johnny Z and Marsha, their situation with Dave was getting worse and out of control, so after one driving accident with Dave behind the wheels, Metallica asked Johnny Z and Mark Whitaker to find a replacement for him, and the guy Mark suggested was none other than Exodus guitar player Kirk Hammett. Kirk Hammett was a really great guitar player, and unlike Mustaine, had a calm and friendly attitude, and although he wasn't a monstrous guitar player like Dave, but he was the best deal they could possibly get and was considered a swift and clean solution for Dave Mustaine's situation. When the band got the words that they can have Kirk Hammett as replacement, now Metallica decided to announce the news to Dave, and when Dave on one Monday got up from the bed half asleep and asked them when they are supposed to fly for the next live show, Lars told him that he is not going to go to the airport and he is going to return home by himself. Something that, according to Mustaine himself, made him so angry and shocked, and he packed all of his stuff in a few minutes and left with James to bus station. This betrayal hit Dave Mustaine so hard, and he got so upset from his friend's decision. He thought that they were friends, and he in his wildest nightmares could not see this coming. A sad and unbelievable event that traumatized him and made him to think of creating his own band of revenge, Megadeth. Something that he started to form in the very first moment of his firing and in the bus toward Los Angeles, and was a sad and bitter story of revenge and competition and hatred from Dave Mustaine, which made one of the most astonishing bedtime stories for music fans around the world. A story of revenge from Dave Mustaine until Metallica regrets losing him. With Dave's firing and with a heart full of hatred from the betrayal his friends had done to him, Dave left the band in the middle of John Zazula and his wife's support and sponsorship, and everything was about to change. Now with Kirk's joining, Kirk Lee Hammett, son of an Irish merchant father and Filipino mother, a boy who in the middle of his parents' fights and mother's beatings by his dad, he tried to imitate his musician brother to become a guitar player. He always fantasized to be just like his idols Jimi Hendrix and Michael Schenker from UFO. While studying psychology and playing Metallica, Kirk worked at Burger King and was trying to get on with his life and pay for his music classes with his teacher, a guy who we all know as one of the greatest guitar players in the world and was none other than the great Joe Satriani. With this background, Kirk, who had played with Exodus since high school and even Metallica had performed an opening show for them, was familiar with these band members and the band itself because he always liked Metallica, and being a member in Metallica was something that he liked from the first encounter with them, and now being its member was sort of a dream come true for Kirk Hammett. Kirk Hammett didn't have any problems like Dave or Ron that this band is supposed to run based on Lars and James' ideas, and maybe this was one of the biggest reasons that made him a perfect choice at first place for the band. A guy that was so eager to be in Metallica that he even passionately went and learned all the band's songs in a short time, and with this change, Metallica immediately could resume its performances. In the meantime, however, James Hetfield still didn't want to be the band's singer at all and wanted to play guitar next to Kirk and write some riffs. So they tried to look for a few singers again, but like always, none of the singers either had interest in joining the band or the group members weren't interested in them. So James continued singing, and this will to leave the position of the frontman slowly faded in him because no one was better than him. One of those singers who rejected the offer to be Metallica's singer was John Bush from Armored Saint, and he basically said that, and I quote, "James himself was a fantastic singer and frontman, and many people, when they hear that I rejected their offer, mostly become surprised. In my opinion, part of the main reason for Metallica's success in the years after these was the emergence of a frontman like James Hetfield, who could become a singer and a charismatic figure that was one of the main reasons of the band's success. Something that he could finally convince himself that he was made for it and must take on this duty himself and come out of that shell of shy and reserved guy and unleash his extraordinary capacity." Metallica was living with John Zazula and his wife, but there were many troubles, so they had to go somewhere else to live with a guy called Metal Joe, where Anthrax band was living too, and by living there with Anthrax they could save on their costs. And at the meantime, Johnny Z also was trying to get a contract for them, but there was a lot of bumps on his way. Metallica's music was so radical and next level that was so different from the music big record labels in those periods of time were interested in, and in the era of Michael Jackson's Thriller around 1982 and 1983, no one was ready for it. So various labels rejected Metallica and their music, and the only place that Metallica could attract the label's attention was Elektra. But this attention wasn't that strong at first, so with lack of interest to Metallica's music, band and Johnny Z decided to continue without a recording label contract and record their first album, so after its release, maybe Metallica can get some attention that it deserves. A bold and courageous move that they did it, and Johnny Z decided to finance this project, and with this sacrifice and unbelievable risk, Metal Up Your Ass was born. But as you can guess, there were a lot of problems along the way. Johnny Z founded a label himself to be able to publish the Metal Up Your Ass, Metallica's debut album, and he even tried to find some connections to distribute the album in Europe and other countries, but the idea of Metal Up Your Ass with the suggested cover of a hand that's coming out of a toilet bowl was probably a suicide for their album sale, and the stores like Walmart would never let this album in their stores. And well, with solving the first problem and starting a label called Megaforce by Johnny Z and his wife, the bigger problem was the album's name and its cover, cause no one wanted to work to distribute an album with this name. A new challenge, which when Cliff Burton becomes aware of it, he just shouted, "Kill 'em all." Something that right away gave Lars an idea of a new title for the album, and as simple as that, Metallica's new album name was chosen. With starting the independent recording process and a big risk, finally with the album's release on July 25, 1983, Kill 'Em All stood at number 120 of Billboard, an unbelievable success for Johnny Z and Metallica, who had invested all their money and basically did a gamble on Metallica, and now they've made it. Something that happened by Johnny Z's faith in Metallica and its originality and capabilities, and it could pave the way for their future successes and bigger live shows and much more recognition. A cool and new band that with its album and killer bangers like Seek and Destroy, Metal Militia, Whiplash and also Four Horsemen and several other incredible tracks haunted the metal music scene. But let's not forget that some of these songs were written by Dave Mustaine, and Dave's writing was a key element on success of Metallica's debut album. Songs that, although some changes had been made to them by Cliff and Kirk, and even the Mechanic's title was changed to Four Horsemen by the band members, but as you can easily guess, these changes and successes made Dave Mustaine furious. Because upon his leaving, he made it clear to the guys that they must not use his writings, but the guys in Metallica ignored him and used his material for their first album anyway. One of the most important factors in Metallica, apart from their fast new wave of British heavy metal driven music, was James Hetfield's incredible down-picking technique. The right-hand rhythm playing method that he had done with palm mute and downstrokes and sounded incredible with their high speed. Their music was inspired by Venom's music and Black Sabbath's downpicking, a new and spectacular sound which could create a particular musical canvas that even Dave Mustaine and Megadeth and Scott Ian from Anthrax and also Kerry King from Slayer used it, and was the basic element of creating four main and important bands, or Big Four, in a subgenre that was called thrash metal, and it was going to change heavy metal forever. With the high sales numbers of Kill 'Em All relative to other metal bands' albums at that time, Metallica found enough confidence to continue, but 17,000 copies were not that perfect for a commercial success of an album in the US market. But Johnny Z and his wife and Metallica members believed that probably their next album could sell bigger numbers, and eventually the next project could guarantee their commercial success. But the problem here was that no one had enough money to go and make the second album anymore. Because Johnny Z and the band had spent all of their money on first album and tour and equipment, therefore there wasn't enough investment for making a new album. So in these situations, here comes a British guy called Martin Hooker. A man who had a reputable background at music industry, and he had started a label called Music for Nations, and with signing contract with Twisted Sister, he and his label could really become famous. So, when he became interested in Metallica, Johnny and his wife collaborated with his label for publishing Metallica in Britain, and so they signed a contract for 3 upcoming albums. A move that with Music for Nations collaboration, Metallica got the necessary budget for preparing its next album and also doing some shows in Britain and Europe in 1984 to promote the band, so they can use this popularity from touring to record their next album, Ride the Lightning. This album was in fact a step forward from Metallica. They tried to step further from their thrash metal roots in this album and create some songs that became part of the best rock and metal songs of the year. From For Whom the Bell Tolls and Cliff's iconic bass guitar riff, to Fade to Black and Suicide Themes Within, or remarkable song in ballad that James never thought they would make one day, to melodic solo playing by Kirk, who had freed himself from repeating Mustaine's fast blueprint, and now he was trying to emphasize beauty over speed, and even Creeping Death and its inspiration from Bible and Ten Commandments story with its very fast and thrashy riff, and the iconic Die By My Hand scream that created one of the most memorable pieces in metal music history, or the astonishing piece of The Call of Cthulhu that was derived from famous author H.P. Lovecraft's stories.
Biggest fight on the hill in the early days, got the till deep inside. Life it seems drifted away, drifting further away. Die by my hand, I creep across the lane.
With this album's release and higher sales amounts, now Metallica had to make a new decision, and according to requests and negotiations that Johnny Z had with Michael Alago in Elektra Records, they signed a contract with Elektra. But at the same time, behind the scenes, Q Prime, which was a bigger label than Elektra, stepped forward and signed a contract with high-ranking managers at Elektra Records and bought out Metallica. A sudden and deceitful plan that not only Johnny Z was not aware of it, even Michael Alago claimed that he had no information about it, and now Metallica was a new band in the roster of Q Prime. A reputable company which could previously bring Def Leppard to international popularity, and Lars always wanted to be like them. A big shift and change of direction that you can easily guess that by Lars' desire to sign with Q Prime, this move maybe was not a secret from the band at all, and the only people who were surprised were Johnny Z and Marsha and Michael Alago. This decision had been made by Lars' approval and his companionship, so just like this, he just crossed Johnny Z and Megaforce despite all efforts he had done for them with justification of some bigger goals. With Ride the Lightning's success, Metallica was on various magazines' covers, and perhaps one of the most memorable moments of this newfound stardom was a historic photo by famous photographer Ross Haffen on the cover of Kerrang! Magazine in 1984. Some young and talented rock stars who were supposed to change music forever. A successful band that with its successful live shows was getting more and more famous, and now was under a big American label and had to get ready to write its third album. Metallica's third album, Master of Puppets, was released in March 1986. A new album that is considered by many people the peak of the Metallica in its early years. A perfect continuation to Ride the Lightning, a collection that with the superb tracks like Battery and The Thing That Should Not Be, which was derived from H.P. Lovecraft novels just like The Call of Cthulhu and Welcome Home Sanitarium, and even Orion with Cliff's iconic bass playing, and also the title track Master of Puppets hit the music world like a thunderstorm and changed music forever. A record that made thrash metal and Metallica popular, and many people who didn't like metal started to listen to this genre by this record. An unforgettable album with themes like staying away from drugs and their incredible riffs made one of the most popular albums of the year, and even got the chance to appear on the front cover of NME magazine, which never had any interest in metal and now was honored to put them on its front cover. With the release of Master of Puppets, although many music lovers and die-hard metalheads argued that this album was not pure thrash and they are shifting away from their early sound, but many people believe that whatever Metallica made was thrash metal and they were kings of thrash. But let's not forget that Megadeth's debut album, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, was also released in this year, and Dave Mustaine, with complex and super heavy songs, tried to show he's better than Metallica and thrash metal crown does not belong to them. A great and sophisticated album that of course was not as popular and as successful as Metallica, but it was not the only rival for Kings of Thrash. Just 6 months later, another great album was released by another legend, the legendary Rain in Blood album by Slayer. An epic record that according to many people was the true version of thrash metal that from Metallica's perspective became soft and mainstream, and even Kerry King talked about it and said they tried to make a commercial album out of it. A thoughtful approach that you can easily guess was completely well calculated by the band, and Metallica could become the most important heavy metal band of 80s with Master of Puppets. Because the band was not going to limit itself to one genre and wanted to write fantastic songs in various musical landscapes, and now was bigger than any other band in metal. Now, after releasing Master of Puppets, Metallica with Q Prime's help could run a big US tour along the heavy metal legend Ozzy Osbourne, and they opened some shows which they could play their songs for bigger audience who had never heard of Metallica, and they could enjoy their bangers and unforgettable songs. Especially since Ozzy was really popular back then in United States, and seeing a new band next to him performing could help them a lot, and Metallica could utilize this opportunity in the best possible way, and they gained a lot of new fans and many more shows in that very same year. But in the middle of these successes, tragedy was on the way. Right in the middle of Metallica's European tour in 1986 and traveling from Sweden to Copenhagen in Denmark, one night in a cold and dark road, the driver of tour bus, where Metallica members in early morning hours were asleep in it, thought that a piece of iceberg is in the middle of the road. So he pulled the bus to the side, and this caused losing control and overturning of the bus. So this incident caused Cliff, who was sleeping in the upper part of the bus, be thrown out of the window and the bus overturned on him. A painful tragedy that immediately the band members, after being conscious about it, realized that their close friend, Cliff, was dead. Someone who was the most lovely, down to the earth, and also most important members of the band, and now was gone. With police's arrival to the scene and escorting the band to hospital and their residency at a hotel in nearby, now Metallica and their team, with complete disbelief, was thinking about losing one of their best friends. A boy who now, James with eyes full of tears, the night after the incident, was screaming his name in the streets near the hotel, and Kirk, upon hearing James' voice, was crying and could not believe that he had lost his roommate and best friend. The news of Cliff Burton's death quickly shook the rock and metal community. An artist who, with his unforgettable bass lines and endless musical skills, had unleashed immeasurable amount of creativity and depth to Metallica's music, and now after his death, and burning his body and scattering his ashes by his friend in his favorite place in the world, Maxwell Ranch, no one even was sure whether Metallica is going to continue his musical journey without him or not. Was Metallica going to stop at the peak of its career success with Cliff's death? This was a question that, of course, its answer became clear immediately. A little bit before his death, Cliff had given an interesting and relatable interview about the death of a bandmate and the other members resuming. The question was like this: if an incident like the death of Led Zeppelin's drummer John Bonham happens, what he would think about moving on? A question which Cliff answered, "Actually, we were thinking about this the other day, and it seemed to us that if one day Lars went to meet his creator like John Bonham, we will have a drunken party in his memory and we will continue our work very quickly." An interview that could give a basic view of the Cliff and band's perspective, and it could make it clear that Metallica now was beyond the name and in this peak of their career and success, and also a big Japan tour that was coming by. Metallica had to return, and with paying respect to their fallen brother, honor his legacy by continuing Metallica. Because if Cliff was in their position, he wouldn't accept giving up and would continue Metallica. Something that the band actually did it, and they needed a replacement for Cliff Burton. So the search began, and they wanted to find somebody who could play bass just like Cliff Burton. Someone who was unknown, not participating in any band, and of course can stand in the legendary shoes of him. The wisest and most intelligent of them, a guy others relied on his advice in emergencies, and now they had to find somebody who could perform as well as him and fill the important role of bass playing in the band. So various interviews were held, and Brian Slagan from Metal Blade, the one who at the very beginning of our story had introduced Cliff Burton introduced a boy called Jason Newsted, someone with previous background of farming and carpentry with a band that he had at the time and had published a few musical projects with Metal Massacre, made Brian to believe that he is a perfect replacement for Cliff. So Brian asked Jason whether he likes to go and do an audition for Metallica or not. Something that Jason replied positively and said, of course, they're my favorite band. Therefore, Jason went on and learned all Metallica's songs overnight, and finally, from among 4 final other bass players, he got chosen by the band members, and only a few weeks to start new shows, Jason Curtis Newsted became Metallica's new bass player. But Jason's membership in Metallica did not go well that easily, and the band members were really mean to him. Violent behaviors toward him as if he was to blame for Cliff's death. A deep anger and frustration toward this new member that maybe was created because of lack of opportunity for grieving for their fallen brother. Something James later confessed as them being too young to understand the concept of their friend's death and caused intense emotional outrages toward Jason. There were times that the band members intentionally tried to make everything harder and harder for Jason for a long time because beneath the surface, unconsciously, they thought that Jason should be blamed and maybe he was not good enough to fill their friend's role. Mean behaviors toward Jason that even ended up with Lars asking from the label that Jason to be fired from the band, which label disagreed. After these dramas and with signing a contract with a new label called Phonogram, the band released a new EP called Garage Days Revisited. Some new live covers from new wave of British heavy metal bands like Diamond Head and Holocaust, so the band could announce its return by introducing Jason Newsted as the new member with some fascinating covers. A new chapter of their career which they were ready to record their next album.
And what of the future?
But there was a serious challenge. Should they follow their previous album sound and basically made a second Master of Puppets, or go and try some new directions with its new member? Something that James and Lars sat down to think through it one day in October 1987, and Lars basically was thinking about moving away from thrash metal sound a little bit and adding some new elements to their music. Something that could push the bands forward, but without Cliff Burton, James couldn't be sure if Lars was right or wrong, and he just nodded in agreement. So they started creating some songs together, and later they invited Kirk to their sessions too, and of course they just didn't ask poor Jason's opinion, and ultimately 9 tracks were ready for the album. But let's not forget that in this time frame, some romantic events have happened in the band members' lives. Lars married his British origin partner Debbie in early 1987, and Kirk married his American girlfriend Rebecca a few weeks before starting their new album. A dramatic turn of events that even happened to Jason, and he married the love of his life. Now the band's famous, successful rock stars seem to decide to settle down a bit with their high pace of life, and they decided to pursue a slightly different lifestyle. Something that of course we know that was changed over the course of next few years, and all of these guys got divorced from their wives, but there was one exception. The only member who was not married at this point and was crazy in love was James Hetfield. He was in love with a girl called Kristen Martinez, and on these days of loving, he even created a romantic song called Nothing Else Matters for her because he missed her a lot during tours, but he couldn't dare to show it to anybody because he was ashamed of this song, and we will get to it later in our story. After all of these events and changes, now Metallica's 4th album was a record called And Justice for All. A new album with the emergence of Guns N' Roses and their massive success, Lars wanted Metallica to stay relevant and be the best rock and even metal act at the time, and he wanted to make something that could be a punch in the listener's face and even immerse them more in Metallica. A record which conceptually was a little bit more focused on social injustice and some kind of social themes with banger tracks like Blackened and Justice for All and To Live Is To Die, and instrumental tribute to Cliff Burton and Harvester of Sorrow. Their fourth album could become another successful record. But that wasn't all. There's one key track in this album that was far beyond any other Metallica's success and hits, and it was a song called Juan. A remarkable song based on the novel Johnny Got His Guns that James had read and wrote the lyrics for it, and turned to one of the best and most memorable tracks they have ever written. Something that took Metallica to another level of stardom and popularity, and now, with its haunting opening guitar riff, was everywhere. One was a big commercial success, and even it could convince the band to finally make a music video using scenes from the movie which was made based on that novel. Something that Metallica didn't want to do previously, and the result was an astonishing piece of art, and it took MTV by storm, and it could help the album to secure the 4th position on Billboard's chart.
Like in the air, winter ripple sand, throwing all you see. To your place there, appetite they devour. Hammer of justice crushes you. Darkness imprisoning me. All that I see, absolute horror. I cannot live.
Nobody, even their label, could believe that Metallica's sales figure is going to rise on their 4th record. This was a step forward for the band, and Metallica could maintain a good commercial success with this record, but Juan, this killer banger, made everybody to talk about Metallica, and they, even against their usual screw radio ideology, edited some parts of the 8-minute song to be played at radio stations. Juan was really successful at the radio stations, and after first time it went on air, more and more radio stations asked to play it, and by this radio coverage they could draw lots of attention from many casual listeners that they have never heard anything about Metallica, and even this radio coverage made the song to be nominated for a Grammy for Best Rock and Metal Performance. New honor that nobody was ready for it, and Metallica was getting a Grammy nomination. Something that even band members could not believe it even in their wildest dreams, and now it had happened. An unbelievable nomination that, of course, in total disbelief, they've lost it to Jethro Tull. Let me tell you one interesting fact about this album. We've just discussed a few minutes ago about Metallica's attitude toward Jason, and one unbelievable thing about this album was that James and Lars deliberately didn't let Jason's bass shine. They lowered his bass sound in the mix, and Jason basically played James' guitar part through the record, and he was not allowed to write any bass lines because James and Lars didn't let him to do so. A mean and unbelievable attitude from these two, and they wanted to decrease their guilty conscience maybe because they let somebody else play bass in Metallica, a weird and mean attitude that tormented Jason a lot in this era and throughout his career with Metallica, and stayed with him forever. But you know, what can you expect from a band when Lars and Kirk were heavily into cocaine and James drank relentlessly, and even Jason smoked a ton of weed, and all of them were hooking up with different girls at backstage parties all the time? I think this traumatized way of rock star stereotype and abuse of cocaine and James' drinking problem maybe was one of the main reasons of their irrational behaviors, and although it was the necessary fuel for their creativity, but I think it was the main reason of these conflicts and made them unstable and violent. A gang of unstoppable rock stars who were at top of their game right now, and nothing could stop them, not even themselves. As the time goes by and we enter 1990, now with the start of a new decade, Metallica started the new decade as best as it could. Winning a Grammy, unlike the unsuccessful nomination of the previous year for Juan, and tons of successful sold-out shows, and even another Grammy in 1991 for the cover of Queen's Stone Cold Crazy on Elektra Records' double album Rubaiyat for label's 40th anniversary. With all these glories, Metallica entered the new decade in the best way possible and everybody was waiting for their next move. The band was thinking a lot about their next record, and as always, they gathered up some ideas and riffs and melodies and they tried to figure out what kind of direction and a path they should follow. Should they write a thrashy album again with their producer Flemming Rasmussen, or should they go and write some more popular songs like Juan? It was a hard choice for the band at the first sight, and many people could sense that the second path would actually be chosen by Metallica, because the next chapter of their career should be growing much bigger and being able to gain more serious fan base in the world, since they had the necessary potential within the band. And so with the label's cooperation, they went hunting for a well-known producer who previously worked with bands like Bon Jovi and could present them hit songs they were eager for. A famous producer that was none other than Bob Rock. Metallica's new album and the various songs they had selected from ideas to record in a studio now were shorter and catchier, unlike their previous approaches, and Bob Rock at some points forced the members to rethink about their songs and even change them to become more radio-friendly, unlike their previous experiences. For example, in Lars' drum parts, Bob even pushed him toward more practicing and being more precise. He even forced James to change some of his lyrics. Nobody had ever told James to change his lyrics, and that was a tough challenge, but James changed some of the words of his verses and choruses so they could be more impactful on audience's mind, and even he wrote some catchier melodies and riffs. A different approach that with a nice and a slow song called Nothing Else Matters that we all know as a phenomenon pop rock song that James had written a long time ago and didn't dare to show anyone in longing for his girlfriend Christine, became a massive and totally change of direction that could go along with Enter Sandman and My Friend of Misery and Sad But True and even The Unforgiven and Wherever I May Roam with its magical sitar riff became a massive and totally change of direction for the band. Songs that could dominate the world at another level that no metal band ever had been able to experience it before, and now this album could bring a different musical direction for the band that no one was even ready for it. A self-titled album which of course was called Black Album because of its black sleeve and cover. This new approach from Metallica, although at the time of its release made many of the band's die-hard fans furious, but with its massive success, it could become a new turning point in Metallica's career and made worldwide hits from the band that nobody in metal scene was capable of making. If I want to tell you a little bit about themes of this album, the main focus of the band on this record was on personal themes and stories like rejection, depression, anger, and even love. Extraordinary songs like The God That Failed, that was the story of James' mothers, and The Unforgiven, which indeed was the story of James himself. Songs that were well received and praised by many music fans around the world and even could introduce many people to Metallica. A revolutionary record that could turn Metallica from a normal metal band to a world-class superstar. One-of-a-kind record that could turn Metallica members from a normal metal band to world-class superstars, and even in terms of The Unforgiven made me, the narrator of this story at age 14, a totally different person. A song that I had found in a CD during my teenage years and introduced me to a new world of insanity and changed me forever, and parts of it became a project of my channel and other things that I have done, and it is the magic of Metallica. A praiseworthy collection of art with James Hetfield's flawless vocals and its astonishing musical sound, and even Jason Newsted's unforgettable bass lines in My Friend of Misery that became the symbol of transition in the music of a band that up until then, with James Hetfield's Macho Man vocals, offered sharp and raw and aggressive songs that only metalhead nerds enjoyed, and now was changing the entire spectrum of metal music.
Say your prayers, it's a one. Don't forget my son to include everything I felt, what I've known, never shine through one so close, no matter how far. And the road becomes my bride. I am stripped of all. Hey, hey.
With over 10 months' non-stop work in the studio and over $1 million cost, this album could offer a one-of-a-kind blockbuster in music history and put all music fans in awe. A super consistent and memorable album that could stand at #1 spot of the Billboard chart for the first time for Metallica and even got them a Grammy nomination for Enter Sandman. Now Metallica was the biggest heavy metal and even rock band of the world, and a little while later the band could perform an unforgettable show in Russia in front of 500,000 or 600,000 people, as James recalled in Joe Rogan podcast. One of the best performances of the all time, as many people entitled it, and according to some unofficial estimations, many people stated that the population of the crowd of the Monsters of Rock festival in Russia was bigger than 600,000 and was close to 1.5 million people in celebration of Soviet Union's collapse, and many eager Russians were banging their heads to Metallica. But let's not forget, popularity and high sell is a double-edged sword, and sometimes reaching that peak might create a downfall from many perspectives, because many people believe when a band reaches to a certain point in their career, they prefer to reuse their old success formula, and this causes them to repeat it again and again, so they would sacrifice their own creativity, and then it becomes their worst enemy. Something that has happened for the band, and many people believe that the next chapter of Metallica is becoming more mainstream. If I want to be honest with you, being mainstream is not bad at all, but Lars Ulrich and Metallica did something that shocked their fans. Regarding following the trends, Lars came up with a weird choice and decided to change the band's appearance so they could distance themselves from heavy metal cliches and their long hair, and basically the band tried to reinvent themselves to be more popular in 1996. A new approach that the band did it, and when a new photo of the band was published, many fans couldn't believe it. Metallica cut down their hair. Something that no one could believe it, and it had a lot of backlash, but their hair was not the only thing that had changed. Lars and Kirk and Jason got divorced from their wives, and Lars's remarriage with a girl called Skylar Stanstein, former girlfriend of Hollywood actor Matt Damon, showed that in Metallica's camp there are more changes on the way, and of course, as we said earlier, many people weren't optimistic about it at all. But there was an exception. James had found enough time to meet his father again in his last years of life, and he could spend time with him, and they even listened to country music, which they both enjoyed. Virgil, a man once made unbearable pain to his childhood and a lot of traumas throughout his life, and now he was at his side, and James even could be there in the very last moments of his life, and even he farewelled him. A father who James said he has forgotten much of his anger toward him and now was more interested in spending time with him rather than bringing up the past. A man James could settle down his past with him, and with his death and his farewell, it seemed that he was finally able to forget part of his unresolved and painful past and could enter a new chapter of his life in which he needed to manifest himself in music and a new Metallica record. A new album called Load. With his father's passing and some changes in the band's love life, this album was easily one of the most personal projects that Metallica did through their career, and although it was personal and emotional, they tried to reshape the raw material with Bob Rock to reach to a more Black Album kind of sound with good tracks like King Nothing and Until It Sleeps, and a country pop masterpiece called Mama Said. They could create some bangers. Songs that, in the case of Mama Said, for example, was one of the most painful and influential pieces in Metallica's history, and it seemed like the band is dealing with lost feelings and grief. Projection of themes like death and loss, and many people could easily find many connections between their real life failures and these songs, like James, whose relationship with his partner Catherine had broken up, and with his father's passing, although he had solved his problems with him, but the concept of this and his lost feelings and emotions had brought him to the most fragile point of his life, and he was trying to understand the concept of nothingness Silence and this.
Tear me open, pour me out. There's things inside that come on now, I'm coming home. I'm not all you wish to be. Wish I may, wish I might have this I wish tonight. Are you sad?
After Load's release and its controversial cover art, the sales of this album, even though it initially stood at number 1 on Billboard chart position, couldn't be matched to Black Album. And despite Bob Rock's superb production, Metallica in the best scenario could maintain itself at number 1, but this was not something the band wanted, and this lower amount of sale maybe was the motivation behind releasing another album immediately in 1997. A new record called Reload that was a bunch of unreleased songs that were made during Load era and were not published in that album, and now could offer a continuation to the sound and idea of that album with similar songs to Load's whole atmosphere. Another perfect record that I personally loved more than Load, and with bangers like Fuel and Memory Remains and Unforgiven 2, could make a superb sequel to Load, and I really enjoyed even after all these years.
Fortune, fame, mirror vein, gone insane, but the memory. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Ooh. Lay beside me. Tell me.
After a while, Metallica released a new double disc called Garage Incorporated with 11 cover tracks. The band realized that in Load and Reload eras, they did not proceed as they should, and maybe this lower album sales in comparison to Black Album maybe was because of their change of their direction. So Metallica decided to put up this cover album to satisfy its fans. A great cover album with an unforgettable cover version of a song by Bob Seger called Turn the Page, and it could make one of the best Metallica songs of their catalog in my opinion, alongside the cover version of Whiskey in the Jar from Thin Lizzy, and the band could once again put a step forward and show that Metallica should never be underestimated. After the Garage Incorporated, the band came up with another ambitious project called S&M, or Symphony and Metal. Metallica, based on their old idea of combining symphony and metal, tried to extend the capacity of their incredible catalog and show that Metallica is beyond a normal heavy metal band, and their songs are kind of soundtracks of an epic movie. A new sonic territory that no band has ever done it, and because of this, they tried to team up with San Francisco Symphonic Orchestra led by Michael Kamen to perform a 2-night special show at 1999. A guy who the band previously collaborated with him and his orchestration of Nothing Else Matters, and now they were able to create a newer and unforgettable versions of their tracks, and these new arrangements could easily become one of the most important peaks of their career and a step forward for heavy metal music. A new achievement and a successful project that, of course, after it, shocking news were published. At 2000, one of Metallica's tracks called I Disappear leaked and was published extensively in the music file sharing network called Napster. Something that when Lars and other band members became aware of it, that many Metallica songs were being exchanged for free by users in this network, it shocked them and made Lars furious. A musician who introduced Metallica to many metalheads with cassette trading and established his brand with it, but now he was not the fan of its same digital method, and now well-known and rich Metallica and Lars didn't like it because it meant that they would lose a lot of money. So after much consideration and a lot of controversy, finally, Lars decided to file a lawsuit against Napster to the court, and after few court hearings and sessions, Metallica could manage to finally settle an agreement with Napster to remove their music from it. But this action and suing Napster was criticized by fans and many other people, and it caused a lot of outrages toward Metallica, especially when the band requested all users who had shared Metallica songs to be banned from the site. An action against the people who obviously were Metallica fans and made many people angry and critic about Metallica's actions against its own fan base. But the controversy did not stop right here, and many other musicians talked about this and even criticized Metallica. Musicians like Fred Durst, singer and frontman of Limp Bizkit, who basically said that the only ones who are critics of Napster are musicians who are worried about their bank accounts. A direct attack toward Lars Ulrich and Metallica, that it was not limited to Fred, and even the Public Enemy's legendary rapper Chuck D made some comments about it, and he said Napster was a platform for promoting art for free or new generation's radio, and it could help music a lot. Something that he expressed his satisfaction in a TV debate with Lars, and with this kind of attitude many people criticized Metallica, and it was something that Metallica did not expect at all, and it was a big blow to Metallica's face. Metallica actually did not believe that taking actions against Napster would bring them any kind of infamy, and they were so serious about it that even the band did some kind of commercial videos to show that listening to music without permission is equal to stealing it. A strategy that of course never worked, and it took years that until Lars subsequently confessed that he was misunderstood in the first place about Napster and the whole situation, and he made a mistake about it, and now they are totally fine if someone wants to listen to their songs for free, especially if the person is from countries that do not have the ability to purchase their music online, and now they even support it. The whole Napster situation was a big blow in the face of Metallica, but in the middle of this chaos and criticisms, James Hetfield was starting a new and quiet life. James recently married his partner Francesca and had become a father. He did not really care about all these band agendas and whole Napster situation, and he was looking forward to have a better future with his family, something that he just experienced it with Metallica, and now being a father and having his own family was bringing immeasurable amount of joy for him. But let's not forget that with these changes and happy new life for James, problems still were lying in the shadows for the band, and something the members knew deep inside that would happen one day and wasn't far from expectations suddenly came to reality, and that was Jason Newsted's departure from the band. Jason, who had never found any serious room for showing off his skills as a lyricist or a musician in Metallica except few bass lines and stuff, gradually started to write his own material. Some ideas that he could not use them in Metallica because he wasn't allowed to do, and now he wanted to create a new musical project with these ideas. A new decision that when he told the guys in Metallica about it, James Hetfield disagreed. James believed that no one should have any side projects going alongside Metallica, and he even explained that he sees releasing music under any other band or project is similar to cheating on your wife, and Metallica should be the main and only musical focus of all members. Therefore, when James then gave the necessary permissions to Jason for his new musical project, Jason, who was tired of all these years of isolation and lack of participation in any musical projects, decided to quit the band, and eventually he formed his own musical band called Ecobrain. After Jason's departure, it was decided that Bob Rock take on the bass playing duties in the band's upcoming project temporarily until a suitable replacement was found, and well, during the production of their next record, James Hetfield made a really hard decision and introduced himself to alcohol rehab. Many believe Jason's departure from the band was the last wake-up call for James. James finally noticed that he has changed to a completely different person, and his anger issues and his behavioral problems was one of the biggest reasons that maybe pushed Jason away, and it made a lot of problems for him and even was threatening his family. James has tried to be sober several times, but he failed every time, and after his marriage and in the middle of tours and severe alcohol consumption issues and his rock and roll lifestyle, he understood that bringing his addiction and his lifestyle to his home is a dangerous thing, and it can hurt his wife and kids. So because of all these issues that alcohol brought up to his life, he decided to save his marriage and his band, and he finally went to rehab, and in the next 11 months he tried to find a new meaning for his life and learn healthy life skills in rehab. Upon James' return from rehab, the next step for Metallica was recruiting of a new bass player. A guy called Miguel Santiago Samuel Trujillo Veracruz, who had played bass since 15 and was in Ozzy Osbourne's band too, and was the best choice for the band as bass player. A new member that with his joining it was time for releasing a new album, and Saint Anger in 2003 raised a lot of hopes about their new record, and many people believe that maybe Metallica can return to its good old days with this album. Many fans wanted this album to be just like their old materials that they were crazy about, and now were desperate to see a new record again. A new project that with complete disbelief turned out to be a complete disaster, and many called it the worst Metallica album ever. With the lack of guitar solos and messy lyrics and even Lars's terrible drum sound, new Metallica record was a complete nail in the coffin. A disaster and artistic suicide from critics and Metallica fans' point of view that nobody appreciated some of its bangers. Tracks like All Within My Hands and Frantic and even Saint Anger, songs that despite their relative popularity and putting the album at number 1 weren't able to repeat this band's historical success among the fans and convince many people that Metallica is dead and they can never make another successful album again. A complete failure in market and in feedbacks that, in contrary, also won a Grammy Award for Saint Anger, but nobody liked this album and its iconic title track music video, and it was considered a big failure.
Saint Anger round my neck. Saint, if I could have my wasted days back, would I use them to get back on track?
After Saint Anger, the next project was a little bit different. In the course of these years, Metallica was involved with some serious challenges. Jason's leaving, James going to rehab, and even finding a new bass player. All these events and many other changes that we barely discussed in this video, and these long years of touring and making records put the band in a deep psychological trauma, and they thought that maybe after all of these years they need some serious help. So their label Q Prime hired a performance coach. Some group therapy sessions that in between band had many major and key changes, like Jason leaving the band, James going to rehab, and Kirk and Lars having lots of arguments. And suddenly when the label wanted to shoot some kind of commercial video to promote the band from their behind of the scene, the idea of filming these sessions came up, and the result was a documentary called Some Kind of a Monster. A different deep dive and a raw and super real documentary about the band, which was meant to be a simple behind the scene commercial video and turned out to be one of the best Metallica documentaries ever, and was released in 2004, and I think it's necessary to watch it. And if you want to be down in Metallica's rabbit hole, I suggest you don't miss it at all. After this documentary and previous disastrous Metallica album and an almost a complete year off in 2005, the band was in a new era. Lars was busy forming a new relationship with an actress called Connie Nielsen and having a child with her, and James just had his third child with Francesca, and Kirk with his Hawaiian wife Lani and their son Angel Requila made a happy and loving family, and everyone, even Robert, was enjoying his life with his family, and the biggest metal band of the world now were enjoying their life with their families, and those rebellious rock stars now were big family guys. So how would mature Metallica sound? As you can guess, a mature Metallica was meant to be completely different from the past recordings, and everyone was excited to hear what a new Metallica record would sound like. But the process of recording a new album would be totally different from the past. There was an online petition from fans asking the band to part their ways with Bob Rock for their new project. Many fans believe Bob must not produce Metallica's next album. A petition with thousands of people signing it, and many angry fans now were convinced that the biggest part of Metallica's downfall after Black Album was started with Bob Rock, and although he did a great job with Black Album, the rest of the records were not as successful as their previous records, and it was time for Bob Rock to step out of production role in Metallica and a new producer starts working with them. A new desperate request from the fans that of course Metallica accepted, and they tried to choose a new producer for their next album. But which producer they should work with? Should they go back and work with their original producer Flemming Rasmussen, or should they find a new producer with a new musical approach? Rick Rubin was a phenomenal producer who has been one of the most influential producers of modern music, and his footprints could be easily found in many modern successful musical acts, from pop, hip-hop and even heavy metal, from Run DMC to Kanye West, from Red Hot Chili Peppers to Lady Gaga. Rick Rubin had defined much of modern music's important soundscape, and he even was responsible for Slayer's Raining Blood phenomenon sound, a legendary producer Metallica wanted for their next record. So the process started, and the band could make an awesome and satisfying album called This Magnetic in September 2008. A well thought and great record with awesome tracks like All Nightmare Long and Unforgiven 3. And even my personal favorite track, The Day That Never Comes. Metallica could once again make a great album with very good songs that could receive many positive reviews from critics and even fans around the world, and it could reach at #1 spot at Billboard once again, something that they had experienced with the previous albums too. But this album stayed longer at #1, and many called it 21st Century Master of Puppets.
Hallucination, heresy, still you run. What's to come? What's to be? Born to push you around. Better just stay down.
With Metallica's return to its root and receiving lots of honor in its whole respective career, the band was inducted to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at 2009 and even did a jaw-dropping performance on its ceremony. An unforgettable and a memorable performance and induction with Jason Newsted was invited alongside the band, and he even played bass next to Robert. But what about Dave Mustaine? Dave, despite his invitation, when he realized that Lars is going to invite him as an ordinary guest and not a member of the band, refused to attend the ceremony. Because Lars and band members believed that he did not actually record anything with Metallica physically, and he was only a songwriter in a band, so this very act prevented Dave Mustaine to attend this ceremony. An incident that you can easily guess sparked a lot of controversies between Dave Mustaine and Metallica and even made the tensions higher, but after a while Dave and Metallica started to settle down the situations a little bit, and they even did some performances together as Big Four alongside Slayer and Anthrax. Dave Mustaine finally tried to understand the whole situation with Metallica and move on, but in some cases during their time he couldn't hide his rage toward his old friends, just like No Life Till Later demo situation, which Lars didn't want to credit Dave Mustaine on some songs of this record and made the tensions between them higher. But after some years and a lot of conflicts, Dave finally decided to settle down everything with them, and now he on his last Megadeth album even did a tribute to Metallica with the cover version of the Ride the Lightning, and even he played Kirk Hammett's solo to honor their history and time and legacy together. One of the biggest conflicts and rivalries in music history that we will get to it later on our channel. After Metallica entered Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they were in a new era of being legends. An important and influential band which changed heavy metal and now was indeed one of the biggest metal bands of all time. So with them entering the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Metallica decided for their next record they would like to do some experimental project with Lou Reed, the legendary singer of the Velvet Underground. A new record called Lulu A new project that of course was not like any other Metallica albums, and the fans did not like it at all. With low ratings and low sale figures, many of them believed that this album was one of the worst Metallica projects ever. An unpopular album that many fans didn't like it, as I said, and even they threatened the late Lou Reed to shoot him down on the street if he ever considers working with Metallica again.
I am a chorus of the voices that gather up the magnet.
This album was a great album, but you know, Metallica fans don't like some experimental Metallica records. They want their good old heavy and thrashy songs mixed with some extraordinary solos and atmospheres. So after Lulu, Metallica once again decided to give their fans what they want, and they released some songs that were supposed to be part of this Magnetic, but they didn't fit in that project, and now were meant to be published in a new EP called Beyond Magnetic. A new project with lots of mixed reviews, which finally did not get much attention, and many of the songs were forgotten under this Magnetic's shadow. After this album, Metallica toured for several years and did not release any album, and this was the longest distance between Metallica's albums. A new era which lasted 8 years, and many people believe that maybe Metallica just ran out ideas and they just want to do some shows, but that was not the case. Metallica was writing some new stuff in collaboration with Rick Rubin, and after a lot of efforts from 2011 to 2016, Metallica finally released their next album called Hardwired to Self-Destruct. A time period that Metallica even released its first movie and some kind of a live show called Through the Never, and they even performed in Antarctica for the first time ever, and the band could become the first music band that performed in all 7 continents of the world, a new record on the long list of honors and achievements they've done through their career, and now it was the time for the band to release its 10th album. Hardwired to Self-Destruct was another successful record from Metallica. Nobody could believe that Metallica is still capable of creating a well-thought and memorable album in 2016. But the band proved once again that they can do anything, and there were lots of awesome tracks in this record that made many fans and critics praise Metallica again. A good album that Metallica now performed one of his key singles called A Moth Into the Flame with Lady Gaga at 2017 Grammys a few months after release, and it was a perfect and controversial collaboration that had some issues, like James Mike didn't start at all and didn't work on the first seconds of the show, but it once again proved that Metallica is still an exception in music history. A heavy and unpopular music pioneer, which can be so popular at the same time, and in these days of pop and rap media coverage, showed that metal music is not dead. A well-received and popular live collaboration with a pop star, which later Metallica did it again with another performance with Miley Cyrus at Howard Show with the track Nothing Else Matters, and it was a perfect example of the timeless songs of Metallica that many people like them still and enjoy them after all of these years, just like Sir Elton John once said that Nothing Else Matters is one of the best songs ever written, and everybody can always relate to their music. Many people can relate to Metallica, even the new generations. One of the key examples of these can be found on Stranger Things series 4th season and Eddie Munson's cover of Master of Puppets through one of the most popular scenes of the show, and it made many teenagers fall in love with Metallica and its unforgettable catalog. A perfect example for Metallica's timeless music, and it can easily show that Metallica's musics are timeless and many people consider them the biggest metal band of all time. One interesting thing about the Hardwired to Self-Destruct is that Kirk Hammett did not collaborate in writing songs of this album. Because Kirk had lost his recorded riffs on his cell phone, and he decided to forget all of his ideas and rely on James and Lars' ideas for this album. Something that turned out to be a really successful album, and they did a great job on it. Some of my favorite songs of this album are Confusion and Murder One. The first song is about surviving and life after war. The story of a soldier who returned home after war, but pieces of his life does not longer seem to fit because he is no longer the same person anymore. Another song that I really enjoyed is a masterpiece called Murder One, a song that is a tribute to Lemmy Kilmister, the late godfather of heavy metal and one of Metallica's role models. A one-of-a-kind and unforgettable song that if you haven't heard it yet, I strongly suggest you to check it out, and it's a banger.
One man does not give a damn. One man.
After this album, Metallica once again started its own world tour, and James, who was once again involved in severe alcohol consumption, went to rehab again. A monster that James was dealing with since his teenage years, and it seems that it wouldn't let go of him that easily, and he needs to fight it once again. Upon James' second return from the rehab, and with the worldwide coronavirus pandemic lockdown and in quarantine days of 2019 and 2020, Metallica decided to use this opportunity and focus on its new album. So band members shared their ideas through the internet, and finally some new songs were written, and in 2023 these songs were released as a new album called 72 Seasons. A new record with good songs and some nostalgic Metallica feeling all over it, and it had hit songs like If Darkness Had a Sun, which I really enjoyed, and it even made many people feel the same way just like me. A good project that it could reach at number 1 chart position, but this residency at number 1 did not last long because it was overthrown by a new and anonymous band called Sleep Token and their phenomenal album Take Me Back to Eden. No one really would expect Metallica to make successful albums one after another, and many people suspect that Metallica made its best albums throughout its career, and nobody can make albums like Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, or even Black Album again. Not even Metallica itself. These records were among the best albums ever made in metal subgenre, and remaking them again would be a terrible mistake because nothing can ever get close to these albums. And as for 72 Seasons, this album was a great reminder of Metallica and its music and soundscape, and I think expecting something as big as Master of Puppets is wrong, and this was an album for people who Metallica changed their life and needed to revisit their memories with them. After 40 years now, and at the beginning of 2026, Metallica is still performing around the world, and well, this legendary band and its fantastic frontman, despite separating from his wife a while ago and marrying to his new fiancée Adriana, is still at top of the metal music game, and they're even breaking some new records. Like breaking the Taylor Swift's concert attendees at SoFi Stadium and showing that this band is still one of the biggest musical acts of the world after 40 years, and they can sell more than a pop star, and Metallica is just more than a band. It's beyond music. It's a doorway to understand that music could be used as a medium to manifest sorrow, loneliness, and anger. A concept of life and living, and an endless war with darkness. Metallica's story, of course, is not finished yet, and Lars claimed a while ago in an interview that they probably are going to tour and make a couple of more albums for next few years. And with this interview, we can easily understand that if we're lucky, we can hear 1 or 2 more albums from Metallica, and if I will be lucky, I could attend one of their shows near Iran, because you may not know that I live in Iran and in my country, and it's stupid rules right now. Music is haram, and listening to Metallica is sort of illegal thing to do right here, so they can't do a show right here in my country, and if I want to see them, I should travel to a country nearby to attend Metallica's concert. This is the end of Metallica's story, something that I recorded in March 2026 in the middle of Israel and United States and Iran's war and internet shut down by the government. So I'm recording this, and I don't know when this blackout will end, and even I can publish this podcast one day. So in these dark and bitter days, and a protest that had happened a while ago in my country and many of my people lost their lives, I'm trying to save myself a little bit of mental health, and I'm trying by recording this podcast to do something useful in these total darkness, and it's really hard, and I hope that all of these darknesses in my country ends one day and finally the people of Iran could be free. Metallica is not just a normal music band. Metallica's story is a story of rebellion, darkness, anger, and grief. Grief and anger that not only was not destructive, but these creative people could express it through music so it could liberate them and even could save millions of people's souls around the world from confusion and anger and grief. People who could feel easily with Metallica that they're not alone and we are all alike. We are a family and we are a bond. A never-ending band that will be one of the biggest bands of all time, and in my opinion, the first encounter of listening to their songs for anybody is a priceless and different experience that even might change your life, and it can make you understand that the word and the music is totally different from the shitty pop song that you hear on the radio, and these are the phenomenons of the music. A history-making and unforgettable band that will never be forgotten.